Today's going to be a little bit of a different video for my channel. I'm going to be looking back on my standings predictions from the 2021 and 22 season and just evaluating how I did with each individual team with those predictions. My Eastern and Western Conference standings predictions videos for this year have become two of the most popular and controversial videos on my channel, and definitely there were some predictions that I did very well on, and definitely there were some predictions I did horribly on. There's probably about 6 to 7 teams that I was just way off with, and today we're just going to look back at those and evaluate how I did with those predictions. So let's get into it. So starting at the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings, the Orlando Magic finished last, and I got this one bang on. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of people did. This is a team, I think they have a pretty good young core and they have some potential, but they just don't have the experience yet. They don't really have a star player yet. Guys like Cole Anthony, Franz Wagner, Mo Bamba, all these guys have a lot of potential really on both ends of the floor, but on both ends of the floor as a team this year, they just weren't there yet. They just didn't have the experience, and they did finish last just like I predicted. 14th was the Detroit Pistons, and I predicted them as the 11th seed. I definitely slightly overestimated this team. I thought Cade was going to have an amazing year, which he did have an amazing year towards the end of the season, but underperformed, especially shooting-wise, a little bit earlier in the year. I still think he has a lot of potential, but on both sides of the floor as a team, the Pistons didn't have nearly good enough depth, and they ranked 28th in offensive rating this year and 24th in defensive rating, and again, same thing with the Magic. They just don't have the experience and the chemistry yet to succeed well as a team. 13th was the Indiana Pacers, and I did well with this prediction. I had them finishing 12th, while a lot of people across the NBA community had this team making the play-in tournament, and I was able to realize that the Pacers were stuck in mediocrity and they had to turn towards a rebuild. They were definitely tanking towards the end of this year, and they are headed in the right direction now, getting a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, a young point guard with a lot of talent and potential, and if Malcolm Brogdon can have a fully healthy season next year, this team could be pretty good. Number 12 in the East was the Wizards. I had them being the 14th seed. Another decent prediction for me here. A lot of people had the Wizards making the playoffs this year, and at the start of the year they were looking like the geniuses, but the Wizards definitely did fall off throughout the season. Their defense ranked 25th in defensive rating at the end of the year, and defensively they just weren't there as a team. Bradley Beal didn't have the star caliber year that many people were expecting, and overall the Wizards as a team just couldn't find a way to get wins late in the season. The 11th seed in the East were the Knicks, and I think this might be my worst prediction that I've ever made. I had the Knicks as the 3 seed this year. It was a very hot take, but after having the best defense in the league in the prior season, I thought that was going to carry over with the great rim protection that they had and the great defensive system they had over Tom Thibodeau, but teams this year just really caught on to the style of which the Knicks play defense, and offensively, Julius Randle just didn't have that same star caliber year that he had in 2020 and 2021. Their shooters weren't nearly as good, and the energy for this Knicks team just did not feel nearly the same, and this was an awful prediction by me. 10th in the East were the Hornets. They were tied for the 9th seed, and I predicted them as the 9th seed. Pretty good prediction here. I saw this team being kind of that 500-ish team with a lot of potential. I mean, their offense this year was top 8 in the league. They do a really good job of getting out in transition. They have a great young core that's going to continue to get better. LaMelo did a great job of leading this team, being a great playmaker. Defensively, this is where this team needs to improve. They ranked 22nd this year in terms of defensive rating. I think they need to go to that zone defense more and get a really certified rim protector. 9th in the East was the Atlanta Hawks, and I definitely overestimated this team. I had them as the 4 seed. Their offense was second best in the league this year. I saw this coming from them. They surrounded Trae Young with shooters, lob threats, and Trae Young himself was turning into a superstar. Their offense was great, but their defense fell off a cliff, and again, teams were just really catching onto their system, shooting more threes against a bad perimeter defending team, and overall they just didn't meet expectations from me and the NBA community, but I'm hoping they can play their way into the playoffs tonight with a win against the Cavs in the play-in game. Speaking about the Cavs, they were the 8th seed this year, and originally at the start of the year I had them as the 13th seed, but right when this year started and I saw this team succeeding, I do have to give myself credit here. I saw them making the playoffs after that because their tall ball strategy, having 3 7-footers on the court a lot of the time, really did work out for them defensively, the way they were able to play that system, and Darius Garland developed into an all-star this year. His playmaking, his shot creation ability, versatility was amazing, and along with Evan Mobley, Lauri Markkanen, and Jarrett Allen, and the tall ball system of the Cavs, that really worked out for them, and that's why they exceeded expectations. The 7th seed in the East was the Brooklyn Nets, who I had as the 1 seed just like everyone else. It was just such a weird year for the Nets. Talent-wise, at the start of the year, they were probably still the best team in the NBA, but then Kyrie with his vaccine issues, that threw a wrench into everything. Harden requesting a trade because of that. Their defense never being stable this year. They just underperform expectations a lot, but they definitely will be a threat as the 7th seed, now decently healthy in the NBA playoffs this year. The 6th seed was the Chicago Bulls, who I had as the 8th seed. I underestimated this team a little bit and then became pretty high on them later in the season, and then they fell off at the end of the year. The reason I had them as the 8th seed, I didn't think they were going to have good chemistry and good defense. The defense part was partly true. The chemistry became good, but then with Lonzo out, this team lost kind of their offensive anchor and they fell off a little bit. And overall, my original prediction is looking decent here. The 5 seed was the Raptors, and as a Raptors fan, I predicted them as a 7 seed. The fact that as a Raptors fan, I underestimated them is just amazing. I was thrilled by what this team was able to do this year. At the start of the year, some of you guys watching this video, if we're being honest, had this team as a 10 seed, an 11 seed, maybe even a 12 seed, but their rebounding got better. Their defensive scheme was still as it was usually. Nick Nurse did a great job with this team on both ends of the floor. Their defense was switchable, energetic, and offensively, this team's starting 5 did a really good job this year, and especially a guy like Scottie Barnes, who personally I think is the rookie of the year. He came out and provided a lot for this team on both ends of the floor, and they have all-star caliber players now in both Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam. 4th in the East was the 76ers, who I had as the 6th seed. I slightly underestimated this team. I didn't really know what to think going into this year with the whole Ben Simmons situation, but they ended up getting Harden, who is underperforming a little bit now, but overall their defense was decent, their offensive system was decent as well, and Joel Embiid's MVP caliber season led this team to being a top 4 team in the East, and they could have been as high as 1, honestly. 3rd in the East, tied for 2nd, was the Milwaukee Bucks, who I predicted as the 2 seed as well. I think a lot of us predicted them either as a 3, 2, or 1 seed. This is a team who we know is going to be good. I think they're the favorite to come out of the East this year in the playoffs. Giannis had another MVP caliber year. Their supporting players like Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton were great on both ends of the floor as well. Their defensive system is great. Their three-point shooting got a lot better, and they're still definitely a championship caliber team. My second most idiotic prediction was this one with the Celtics, because they ended up being the 2 seed and I had them as the 10 seed. And the worst part of this is early in the year, I was looking like an absolute genius for this hot take, having the Celtics as the 10 seed. But then ever since 2022 hit, they flipped the switch. Jason Tatum's having an MVP caliber year now after it being considered that he was having a down season. And the Robert Williams led defense, him anchoring this defense, was amazing. Their switchable style of defense really allowed them to become probably the best defensive team in the NBA. That combined with their offensive system, which got a lot better flowing, the Celtics team definitely flipped the switch. Ime Udoka should maybe be a candidate for Coach of the Year. They just completely flipped the switch, and I'm looking like an absolute idiot for having them as the 10 seed. And the 1 seed in the East this year is the Heat. I had them as the 5 seed. Honestly, they could have been as low as the 4 seed. It got pretty close towards the end of the year, but especially defensively, this team was great as always. Bam Adebayo leading this team defensively. Jimmy Butler, especially at the start of the year, having kind of an MVP caliber year. Not anymore, but at the start of the year, he was great. The addition of Kyle Lowry, his playmaking, his leadership really helped this team. Their coaching's always great, and I probably should have put them higher, and they did finish as the 1 seed. Let's move on to the West. Last place in the West was the Rockets. I had them finishing 13th. Pretty close with this one here. This is a team who has a lot of young potential, but kind of the same thing as the Magic. They don't have enough experience. Guys need to know their roles a little bit better. They look kind of disorganized offensively and ranked dead last in defensive rating. 14th was the OKC Thunder. I actually had them 12th. I slightly overestimated them because of how high I was on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and he had a great year, especially towards the very end of the year, but their depth is just not there yet, and they need to kind of utilize all those first round picks that they have to really kickstart that rebuild. 13th was the Portland Trailblazers. A lot of fans had this team being in the top 8. I predicted them as the 11th seed, which is a little bit of a hot take, and they were actually even worse than that. So I actually do give myself a little bit of credit for this prediction here. I knew there was going to be uncertainty around Damian Lillard, and I knew this team was still one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA, and because of that, I had them outside the play-in tournament, and they finished even lower than that. 12th was the Sacramento Kings, and I had this team finishing 14th. They slightly overperformed my expectations. They have a decent young core, but trading Gordon Halliburton I think was a bad decision for them, and I think they might be stuck in mediocrity for a while, unfortunately. Of course, 11th in the West was the Lakers. I had them as the 1 seed. I'm not even ashamed of how bad this prediction is, because I know that pretty much everyone made this horrible prediction as well, and I'm not even going to talk about what went wrong for the Lakers, because we've all heard a little bit too much about the Lakers recently. 10th was the Spurs, and I actually got this one bang on. A lot of people had the Spurs bringing up the rear in the West, but I made this prediction. I'm proud of this one that I made. I think that their young core was really underrated. Their young core of DeJounte Murray, Keldon Johnson, Jakob Poeltl, all of these guys and more can provide a lot on both ends of the floor, all coached by Greg Popovich. It worked out decently for this team. They were able to squeak into that play-in tournament, and even though they did end up getting eliminated a couple nights ago, I think this team has a lot of potential as a young core. The 9th seed was the Pelicans. They overperformed expectations, but not my expectations. I did have them as the 8th seed. Another decent prediction here for me. Look at me out here making good predictions all the time, which isn't exactly true, but with the Pelicans, I thought that Zion was going to be fully healthy, so this prediction is skewed a little bit. I probably would have underestimated them if I knew Zion would have been out, but they got a defensive special in Herb Jones. Jonas Valanciunas provided great inside presence for them, and Brandon Ingram was doing what he does best, scoring the ball. And when they get Zion back next year, if he can be fully healthy, I think this team has a lot of promise, and Pelicans fans should be happy. The 8th seed was the Clippers. I had them as the 7th seed. I knew this team was going to be that team that without Kawhi was not going to be a dominant team anymore, but was still going to be that pesky type of team that plays well together as a team. They had good depth. They pass the ball a lot. They have good ball movement. Offensively, they're a good defensive team, and Paul George did a good job doing what he does best, being that main player for them. And overall, they pretty much met expectations for me and a lot of the NBA community. 6th seed this year was the Nuggets, who I had as the 4th seed, and if they did have Michael Porter Jr. throughout the whole year, they probably would be the 4th seed realistically. I knew coming in this year that Jokic was going to have another MVP type of year. He's just that good and unique and dominant of an offensive player, but at the same time, this team wasn't good enough defensively to be really an elite team and a top 3 or top 2 team in the Western Conference. So overall, I'd say they probably met expectations, especially considering that they had to deal with some injury problems throughout the whole year, and Jokic had to carry the load a lot of the time. The Jazz were the 5 seed this year. I had them as the 3 seed. It was looking like they were going to be that top 3 type of team with great team offense, with great ball movement led by Donovan Mitchell, and great team defense, great interior defense specifically led by Rudy Gobert. But towards the end of the year, they definitely did fall off a little bit. Their chemistry isn't really the same. They're just not hitting as many shots, and they're probably unfortunately going to get bounced in the first round by the Dallas Mavericks. Speaking about those Mavericks, they finished as the 4 seed. I predicted them as the 5 seed. I definitely saw this dominant offense coming from them, led by Luka, his magic, his ability to run the pick and roll, kick it out to the shooters that he has, and their overall offensive system and supporting cast being pretty good. I did not see this defensive success for them, and I think that's what it might allow them to succeed a little bit more in the playoffs now. The 3rd seed was the Warriors. They bounced back and showed that they're still here. Klay Thompson coming back now has provided definitely a little bit for them. Their offensive and defensive system has been good this year, and I had them as the 6th seed. I slightly underestimated them. I thought they were going to fall off a cliff just a little bit with their depth not being the same, but their defense definitely was the same as it was in 2015, and towards the end of the year, they did lose a little bit more games than expected, but overall, over the course of the entire season, I definitely still underestimated the Warriors a little bit. The 2 seed was the Memphis Grizzlies, who shocked the NBA community. I had them as the 9 seed. And while a lot of people did kind of have them around that range, I'm actually a little bit upset for myself not seeing this explosion coming from the Grizzlies, because they had a lot of players that were just due for a breakout year, like John Morant, who's going to win Most Improved Player. Desmond Bane improved a lot. Jaren Jackson Jr. is one of the best defensive players in the league now. Dylan Brooks was great as well. He improved, and I think I should have seen this coming. And overall, just on both ends of the floor, with their energetic defensive system and everyone on their team improving offensively a little bit, this Grizzlies team was just absolutely dominant this year and moved all the way up to the 2 seed. And lastly, we have the Phoenix Suns, who ran away with the league this year. They finished first in the Western Conference. I had them as the 2 seed, and a lot of people kind of slept on the Suns going into this year after their finals run, but I saw this coming from this team. Not exactly this level of extreme dominance, but I knew their offensive and defensive systems were going to be dominant, and I think this team is definitely going to win the NBA championship this year. So there you have it. That's the end of today's video. Today's video was definitely fun to look back and see how I did with my standings predictions. What do you guys think? Do you think I did well with my predictions? Do you think I did bad? I think it was a mix of both. I think overall I probably did pretty well with my predictions this year, but again, there were definitely some that were way off. And let me know what you guys think of today's video in the comments, and let me know how you think you did with your standings predictions before the 2021-22 season. I'm hyped for the playoffs. I hope you guys are too. My playoff predictions will be coming out soon, so stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do that, and I'll see you guys next video.